Hey, well, what's up, guys? Welcome back to The Collision. Daniel here to talk about the latest monster flick, Godzilla Minus One. I've seen it, so let's talk about it. So let me say just right off the top that when it comes to sort of gigantic monsters just smashing a lot of stuff, sort of that genre falls right in the middle of my personal movie-going tastes. I am definitely the target audience for these types of movies. But having said that, having seen my fair share, probably more than my fair share of these kind of movies, I can also say that not all monster movies are created equal, and especially a lot of recent of kind of in this genre, including even other iterations of Godzilla, have really tested my love and enjoyment of this genre. So I did go into Godzilla Minus One. I was intrigued, but I went into the theater a little bit with some cautious optimism. But I can happily say that I left the theater just fully satisfied. I loved almost everything about this film. I think this is an exceptional monster movie, and really is a monster movie done right. One that does balance sort of the exciting spectacle of the monster with sort of compelling, emotionally earned human drama. I think this is not only one of the best kind of monster movies that I have seen in a long time, but this may well be one of my favorite movies of any variety that I have seen this year. And it's probably important to note right from the start that Godzilla Minus One, this is a Japanese-made film, which means that the dialogue in this film is Japanese. Then you have sort of the English subtitles. And I think for viewers that aren't just accustomed to like foreign language films, there is a bit of an adjustment period at the start where you're kind of got to get used to reading the words and not just hearing them. Although at least personally, I was surprised at just how quickly you kind of fall into a rhythm of sort of reading the words. And to the point that about 20 minutes into this film, I totally forgot that I was even reading subtitles. And I think this is a movie that is definitely worth kind of the extra effort. With some sort of healthy, I think, kind of restrictions as far as this sort of a limited budget, as well as I think some just inspired creative decisions. Godzilla Minus One is a reminder of why monster movies can be so effective. I think in contrast to some of the more mainstream monster movies in recent years that just seem to have devolved into just a bunch of sort of empty CGI-driven spectacle, Godzilla Minus One does understand that kind of to be a successful monster movie, there are two elements that you have to do well. One, obviously, is this the monster itself has to be exciting, but kind of on the other side of that, the human the human drama has to be almost equally as compelling. But being a Godzilla movie, why don't we just start with the King of Monsters himself? The design of the monster in this is sort of an enjoyable kind of throwback aesthetic. The movements of him are a bit clunky, and like his facial expressions are pretty stiff. But I think rather than coming across as like overly silly or campy, the way that they use the monster in this keeps him sort of consistently exciting. The film doesn't hide the monster like a lot of these types of films do. In fact, you see almost immediately from the thrilling opening scene, you see the monster Godzilla in all of his glory. But it also doesn't overuse the character. I don't know whether that's just an intentional decision or just because the lack of budget, they had to do that. But Godzilla is used sort of sparingly enough throughout this that it never loses sort of that menacing presence. And kind of amplifying that, they do a lot of effective sort of ground level kind of POV shots and this kind of clever sound design that are used effectively to just showcase the immense scope. You always feel the weight of the monster when he's walking and when he's moving. And I came across there's an interesting interview with the director of this film, stated that he wanted to make a film where Godzilla looks as if fear itself is walking towards us and where despair is piled on top of despair, and kind of bucking the trend that seems to be recently of like humanizing the monster. And Godzilla in this movie always remains a total destructive force of nature, which lets him be kind of both mysterious and also terrifying. But because the monster is used sparingly and does have relatively limited screen time, obviously the human drama also has to be compelling and keep interest in those intervals before the big kind of spectacle-driven Godzilla attacks. And this movie does, I think, perfectly balance sort of that drama with giving enough sort of levity while also having kind of more serious kind of gravitas to it as well. The filmmakers are clearly aware that this is a B movie, and they do infuse the story with a lot of crowd-pleasing moments and humor. At the same time, it does take itself seriously enough to explore kind of weightier themes. And despite sort of being obviously the fantastical elements of a big monster, sort of the story itself remains very grounded in its human drama, and the characters that do populate this story aren't just sort of mindless kind of caricatures, cookie cutter, just fodder for the monster, but they do come across as believable characters that do have these sort of nuanced emotional journeys. I think too, just as a Christian, there tends to be two types of monster films. Sort of one type that seems to glorify death and sort of uses human suffering as spectacle, and then the other type that more elevates life. And you can usually discern between the two based on whether you're cheering for the monster to get another victim or whether you're cheering for the characters to persevere and survive. And Godzilla Minus One definitely falls into the latter category. There is death, there is sort of suffering, a staggeringly high kill counts. The deaths never feel flippant. There always sort of is weight and meaning behind this film that I think overall is one that elevates sort of more the importance of life rather than just sort of the spectacle of death. As far as content to consider, things going on the surface of this thing, there's really not a whole lot. Language, I counted about 4 to 5 sort of minor profanities, and then maybe 1 or 2 other kind of words like screwed that get used, but nothing major as far as language goes. Sexuality, nothing here as well. Maybe the only thing to note is that sort of as part of the plot, there is like an unmarried man and unmarried woman that end up living together to raise sort of this orphaned child. But it's made very clear throughout the film that there's no sexual activity going on between them, that it is sort of a wholesome kind of, partnership between the two of them. So nothing there to be concerned about. As far as violence goes, obviously there is violence, but despite like a death count that ultimately reaches up into like the tens of thousands, the violence depicted on screen is fairly infrequent and mild. Probably the most of that violence comes in sort of this opening scene where Godzilla is attacking an island, and there's these soldiers and mechanics, and several of them do get like chomped on and kind of thrown away and or stepped on, but for the most part, there's not really any blood or anything gratuitous in those depictions. And then in some other sort of attack scenes, characters are getting stepped on and kind of big crowds in the city. But again, nothing's depicted very clearly on screen. And kind of beyond that, most of the violence in this is just implied. The widespread devastation of sort of these cities being destroyed by the atomic breath or through the tail, and sort of the implication we're told how many people died. But this isn't a film that necessarily shows you those deaths. Maybe one other content thing is that religion doesn't really play a major role in any way in this film, although the main character in it does sort of have sort of this altar shrine where he's sort of honoring his deceased parents, and he does sort of talk to these pictures a bit, and at one point he is kind of talking about how he can't be forgiven for what he's done, and the implication is either maybe that sort of these people that have died before him can't forgive him, or else some other sort of unknown spiritual entity. So there is some like hints of kind of religious belief, but nothing that's really kind of front and center in this. As far as themes kind of going on beneath the surface of this, some themes and worldview stuff, I think there's several layers with this movie. Obviously, on the surface, this movie has clear like historical significance, with Godzilla very much kind of being representative of like the fears and anxieties of sort of that age, because this movie is set in sort of post-war Japan after the dropping of the atomic bomb, where Godzilla is clearly intended as a metaphor for the atomic bomb and his breath. And there's several very striking visuals where Godzilla sort of looking up at the big mushroom cloud that he's caused, which is obviously drawing very clear parallels. And kind of similar to that, with the main character in this film, Godzilla has more of like a personal representation of sort of his own like PTSD from the war. Because in one scene he has like a nightmare where he's imagining Godzilla. Kind of when he wakes up, he's asked sort of what is causing this terror, what is he concerned about, and he sort of shares his experiences with the war first before he even gets to Godzilla, and sort of his fears and inability to protect people or do his duty. Obviously sort of establishing that Godzilla is sort of a metaphorical for his own journey as well. But I think beyond sort of the specific sort of themes and stuff that this film is trying to do, I think it also just explores some more like universally relatable themes just about grief and sort of dealing with suffering and kind of pursuing life amidst sort of the hardships of just sort of the world and our experiences. Because even the -1 in the title, Godzilla -1, is kind of referring to the fact that these characters, especially in this specific setting of sort of post-war Japan, have seemingly lost everything. They're sort of at zero, and then Godzilla shows up and things somehow get even worse. And sort of the main conflict for these characters is how do you kind of keep moving forward when this seems like everything is sort of crumbling around you. And the main character several times states that his war isn't over. Kind of despite the World War II conflict having been completed, he sort of this internal fight within him continues to haunt him, and as a result, he is unable to sort of move forward. And kind of in a beautiful moment at the end, again, I don't want to spoil the details of this, but it is sort of this simple drawing from a child that does sort of reawaken that desire for life, and as kind of a reminder to him that despite sort of the hardships in this world, there is sort of a beauty that is worth pursuing. And while the film doesn't necessarily draw biblical connections itself, there obviously are some parallels with that. The Bible often speaks just about that promises there will be suffering in this world, but also verses like Matthew 6:32 or James 4:14, just a reminder that we are to live in the moment, not fret about the past, not fret about the future, but that we can sort of find beauty in the gift of life even amidst our suffering. So then, obviously, I love this movie. I think this movie is great. I think this movie just hits all the right notes, not just as a monster movie, but just as a movie. This is a well-made movie from start to finish. It's an immersive movie. It's an emotional movie. It's an exciting movie. This movie just really has it all. So I know like the subtitles might be prove too daunting and keep some people away from the theaters, but I think people that are willing to sort of maybe try something different and take the extra effort with those will be rewarded with a great film. Because to me, Godzilla -1 has set sort of a new lofty standard for monster movies. But hey, let me know what you guys think. If you guys check this out, if you guys enjoyed this as much as I did, if maybe you didn't enjoy it, either way, jump into the comment section. Let's have a conversation about this. And if you haven't done so, I encourage you guys to subscribe to our channel, become a Collider. A lot of fun stuff we do, and movie reviews and podcasts and just other fun things. Would love to have you be a part of that. But most of all, guys, thank you for watching. Stay safe and continue to collide with your world for Christ.